This is VOA News. I'm Alexis Strope. Age is again playing a big role in the presidential race after yesterday's special counsel report called out issues with President Biden's memory. AP Washington correspondent Sagar Meghani reports.
The report calls the 81-year-old a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
My memory is fine.
He lashed out at the report yesterday, but while doing so,
President of Mexico, Sisi.
He's actually Egypt's president. The report underscored some voters' concerns about the president's age and mental fitness and those of Donald Trump.
Nikki Haley is in charge of security,
who last month appeared to confuse his GOP challenger with former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
He's a little confused these days.
Haley said it's time for the older gentleman to take a seat.
The first party to retire, its 80-year-old candidate, is going to be the party that wins this election.
Trump had his own retort.
I don't mind being 80, but I'm 77. That's a big difference.
Sagar Meghani at the White House.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has used an interview with former Fox News host Tucker Carlson to urge Washington to recognize Moscow's interests and persuade Ukraine to sit down for talks, AP correspondent Charles de Ledesma reports.
Putin said in the interview aired Thursday that Russia stands ready to negotiate a potential prisoner exchange that would free Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich. He was detained in March on espionage charges he denies. Most of the interview, though, focused on Ukraine, where the war's nearing the 2-year mark. Putin repeated his claim that his invasion of Ukraine, which Kyiv and its allies describe as an unprovoked act of aggression, was necessary to protect Russian speakers in ethnic Ukraine and halt its accession to NATO. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
For additional stories, visit voanews.com. This is VOA News. Global cocoa prices hit fresh record highs on Thursday as traders continued to scramble for supplies, predicting ever wider deficits this season and with concerns growing for the next. Reuters correspondent Julia Satterwhite reports.
Cocoa beans are a hot commodity right now. In fact, they've never been more expensive. And that's bad news for chocolate lovers everywhere. Benchmark cocoa futures have hit all-time highs in New York, approaching $5,900 per tonne. That's close to twice the level this time last year. Prices have jumped as poor harvests leave supplies running short. In number 2 producer Ghana, production is expected to hit 500,000 tonnes at best. That would be more than 150,000 tonnes down on the previous year. There's concern over the crop in top producer Ivory Coast too.
Julian Satterwhite from Reuters. Farmers in Italy, Spain, and Poland are demonstrating as part of ongoing protests against European Union farming policies. The actions follow similar ones in other EU member nations in recent weeks, with farmers complaining that the 27-nation bloc's environmental and other policies are a financial burden and make their products more expensive than non-EU imports. The European Commission has made some concessions to farmers over the last weeks, including shelving plans to halve the use of pesticides and other dangerous substances. Donald Trump wins the U.S. state of Nevada's Republican Party presidential caucuses. AP correspondent Donna Warder reports.
The former president was the only major candidate to participate in the GOP caucuses, and he wins most, if not all, of the state's 26 delegates.
They sort of knew who was going to win. You get 98%. We wanted to get over 80%. And we got 98.
Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley did not participate in the caucuses, blaming what she said was an unfair process that favored Trump. So far, Trump has won Nevada, Iowa, and New Hampshire. And the GOP race now pivots to Haley's home state of South Carolina, which will have its primary on February 24th. I'm Donna Warder.
Pakistan's former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif says he will seek to form a coalition government after his party trailed independent candidates backed by his imprisoned rival Imran Khan in parliamentary election results. Sharif told supporters Friday he was sending his brother to meet other party leaders to invite them to join a coalition. Nawaz Sharif had rejected the idea of an alliance a day earlier, saying he wanted a single party running Pakistan. But he changed his position after results showed candidates backed by Khan leading in the vote count, a surprise given claims by Khan supporters and national rights body that the balloting was manipulated against him. For additional stories, visit voanews.com. I'm Alexis Strope, VOA News. This is VOA News. I'm Alexis Strope. Over 1 million Palestinians crammed in the southern Gaza city of Rafah are bracing for further assault as Israel orders them to move further south towards the Egyptian border during its war with Hamas. Lucy Fielder from Reuters has more.
Israeli forces are gearing up for a ground assault in the southern Gaza city of Rafah and have ordered Palestinian residents there to move ever further south. The United Nations is warning Israel against a mass displacement of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip.
We would not support in any way forced displacement which goes against international law.
More than half of Gaza's 2.3 million people are sheltering in Rafah. Arab nations, especially neighbours Egypt and Jordan, strongly oppose any Israeli attempt to push Palestinians over the border. Egypt says it will not allow such movement onto its territory. Israel has dismissed all suggestions that mass displacement is on its agenda. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office says it has ordered the military to develop a plan to evacuate the population of Rafah.
Lucy Fielder from Reuters. A Russian drone strike has killed several people in Ukraine's second-largest city. AP correspondent Karen Shamus reports.
Firefighters in Kharkiv worked tirelessly to control a massive fire after a Russian drone strike hit civilian infrastructure. The blaze burnt down 15 private houses, according to Kharkiv's regional governor. Kharkiv's mayor, Ihor Terekhov, posted a defiant video on his Telegram channel in which he said, "The Russian aggressor is destroying our hero city Kharkiv, but we will overcome this. We will win." Ukraine's Air Force said air defense systems destroyed 23 out of 31 Iranian Shahed drones launched by Russia overnight. I'm Karen Shamas.
You'll find expanded coverage of world news and events 24 hours a day at voanews.com. This is VOA News. Senegalese President Macky Sall Saturday defended his decision to postpone elections Saturday as a violent protest against the move continues. VOA's Jeff Custer reports.
In an interview with the Associated Press Saturday, his first since announcing the delay a week ago, Sall brushed off allegations the decision was unconstitutional and that he'd created a constitutional crisis, saying the country needed more time to resolve controversies over the disqualification of some candidates and a conflict between the legislative and judicial branches of government. But much of the public fears that Sall, who faces term limits, is just seeking to delay leaving office. Sall spoke to the AP inside the presidential palace in the capital, Dakar, while outside hundreds of protesters took to the streets, burning tires, throwing stones, and blocking traffic as security forces used tear gas to disperse them. Jeff Custer, VOA News.
Spanish police on Saturday scuffled with a group of farmers and lorry drivers in Madrid as they tried to access a main road in a bid to block it. One of several protests sweeping the EU against the bloc's environmental rules and what workers see as excessive taxes and red tape. Since Tuesday, Spanish farmers have joined peers from Germany, France, Italy, Portugal, and Belgium in daily protests that include blocking several highways and ports. Shortly after the vote, hundreds of protesters walked around the Madrid stadium before trying to access a main street via a dirt road. Using force, dozens of police officers managed to stop them from doing so. Pakistan has hit back at criticism over the conduct of its parliamentary elections, which were held amid sporadic militant attacks and an unprecedented suspension of all mobile phone services. More from VOA's Tommy McNeil.
Pakistan insists the vote was peaceful and successful. Saturday's strongly worded reaction from the foreign ministry came after the U.S. State Department said Thursday's vote was held under undue restrictions on freedoms of expression, association, and peaceful assembly. The European Union has also said it regrets the lack of a level playing field. No political party has gained a simple majority in the election, but independent candidates backed by imprisoned former Prime Minister Imran Khan took a lead in the vote count. Tommy McNeil, VOA News.
More than 100 people turned up to protest over the 2026 Milan-Cortina Olympics despite the inclement weather. Around 150 people gathered in the pouring rain on Saturday outside the construction site for the Olympic Village in Milan. Many held banners and placards against what organizers of the protest called, quote, the most unsustainable games ever. One sign was in the shape of the Olympic logo of 5 rings with the words concreting, gentrification, greenwashing, privatization, and eviction written in the circles. The march was organized by the Unsustainable Olympics Committee against the rising costs and environmental damage. For additional stories 24 hours a day, visit voanews.com. I'm Alexis Strope, VOA News.
This is VOA News. I'm Joe Ramsey. Egypt has threatened to suspend its peace treaty with Israel if Israel's Gaza offensive expands into the densely populated border town of Rafah. That's according to two Egyptian officials and a Western diplomat who spoke to the Associated Press. The Camp David Accords have been a cornerstone of regional stability for nearly a half-century. The threat to suspend them came as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vows to send troops into Rafah, saying it is necessary to defeat Hamas. Over half of Gaza's population have fled to Rafah to escape fighting elsewhere. Israel's war on U.S.-designated terrorist group Hamas hits the West Bank economy, AP correspondent Rika Ann Garcia reports.
In response to the October 7 Hamas attack that triggered the war, Israel severed economic ties with the West Bank, barring thousands of Palestinian workers from entering the country. In the past 4 months, many businesses there shut down or scaled back operations, leaving Palestinians struggling to afford food as their savings decline. Israeli officials said that Gaza workers won't be allowed back into Israel, but there are reports suggesting they might consider allowing West Bank workers who are over 45 to return. I'm Rika Ann Garcia.
Crowds of Palestinians and Lebanese marched the streets of Beirut on Sunday in a protest in support of Palestinians in Gaza. Protesters waving Palestinian flags and chanting in support of Gaza and against Israel gathered at the end of the demonstration in front of the United Nations headquarters in central Beirut. The conflict in Gaza began on October 7th when Hamas gunmen stormed border defenses to attack Israeli towns. This is VOA News. The death toll from a massive landslide that hit a gold mining village in the southern Philippines has risen to 54, with 63 people still missing. A landslide hit a mountain village on Tuesday night after weeks of torrential rains. The local provincial government said on Sunday that 54 bodies had been retrieved. Top Western officials criticized former U.S. President Donald Trump on Sunday after he suggested the United States might not protect NATO allies from a potential Russian invasion if those countries hadn't spent enough on defense. Reuters correspondent Lisa Bernard reports.
Trump's comments came during a weekend rally in South Carolina in which he claimed that the president of a, quote, big country, whom he did not name, once asked him about potential U.S. protection from Russia if that nation fell short on its defense spending. Trump said he told the NATO leader that the U.S. in that case would offer no protection and went as far as to say he would even encourage Russia to, quote, do whatever the hell they want. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg responded to Trump's comments by saying, quote, any suggestion that allies will not defend each other undermines all of our security, including that of the U.S., and puts American and European soldiers at increased risk.
Reuters correspondent Lisa Bernard. Ukraine asks Australia for specialists for burn victims. Experts from Kyiv are urging Australia to share world-leading techniques. Doctors say the number of Ukrainians dying from injuries caused by burns during Russia's invasion is rising sharply and warn Ukraine's medical system is struggling to cope. From Sydney, Phil Mercer reports.
Rudy Myhovich of the Christian Medical Association of Ukraine told the Australian Broadcasting Corporation he hopes the government will send doctors to Ukraine.
We hope to get teams of plastic burns doctors to Ukraine for short term. We respect your time, and we're trying to be careful with and maximize all of the help that is in our hands. But also we plan to send Ukrainian doctors. They can observe and take knowledge and better skills. So because the amount of cases is unbelievable.
Attacks on healthcare facilities, a lack of medical staff and power shortages have made it harder for victims to receive care during the conflict. Phil Mercer, VOA News, Sydney.
Police fired tear gas to disperse supporters of jailed former Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan Sunday after his party urged protest outside election offices where they said rigging had taken place in last week's national vote. Clashes were reported in some spots, while dozens of other protests were held across the country without incident. I'm Joe Ramsey, VOA.